Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 8 now. We're going to start talking about meetings, and more meetings. It is a constant tool in project management practices, right? Aren't we ever going to get some real work done around this place? How many times have you heard that statement, right? Perhaps you've said it yourself a time or two. It has been, frankly, my experience that most meetings are poorly planned, conducted, and frankly, a waste of significant amount of time. So you'll want to review some of the meeting videos on the website this week under the course material. Frankly, meetings need to be planned. You should set out an agenda with a time limit for each discussion. Forward it to the people that you invite in advance. Don't just invite the same players every week, because invite people that are pertinent to the meeting and the topics at hand. Start the meeting by going over the taskers or deliverables that were due and collect a status or ask why they're not complete, right? So start with the deliverables, start on time, respect everybody's time, identify the meeting leader. You may even have a timer, somebody else that's doing the timekeeping during the meeting. I've done that on occasion. State the meeting objectives. When you go around the table, I don't like new information. Unless it's an emergency that must be dealt with right now, send me an email and let's put it on the agenda for next week, right? Too much time is spent giving background on issues, and people, they just end up dancing and they shouldn't have to, right? Assign a person to take minutes who will include a box of taskers or deliverables that are due out and send those out. Now, we also want to remove in our projects as leaders critical impediments, right? So impediments are anything that keeps the team from being productive. In fact, I use Microsoft Teams, and it has a column on it that is meant for that very specific tool, right? Which is great. So if I go to Microsoft Teams, look under tasks, I have a sort of Kanban board available to me, which is useful. And that will list things like work in progress, work done, and I also have a work to begin that hasn't yet. And finally, I do a blockers, which need escalation support, right? So that's a power of the project manager, and you want to find a way around that. Impediments. So some common corporate impediments include the project managers can often become product owners, right? And the product owner is the one that owns the project. Project managers traditionally focus on communicating with the customer and their intent with the team. So there's often a lack of credibility or authority sometimes. You want to be aware of that. Team members working on multiple projects, right? Because they're matrixed out. So it can be hard for them to find time to collaborate. And it's going to require context switching all the time, which is both an overhead and a risk, right? Ideas and information get lost as people switch between projects. So not everything is included sometimes, right? Many activities that should be included are not, due to constraints, due to tradition, due to processes. Testing is a classic example, right? In many organizations, there are separate testing teams which result in missed tasks. If it's an application, slower bug resolution, and loss of rapid feedback, right? So a project culture causes teams to lose momentum sometimes. We want to be wary of that. Project teams are often formed for one project. Agile methods encourages the team to stay together across the project, which is great. But on a traditional project, they come in, they do their task, and they leave, right? So in the project culture, learning can sometimes suffer. Teams can lose momentum, and and they can lose flow, right? When you're socializing working practices. So, if there are no impediments, is that possible? Well, um, use the daily stand-up approach in Agile to see if there are any with your team. We asked 3 questions. What did you do yesterday to get to the top priority? What will you do today to get to your top priority? And what impediments are preventing you from doing that? Okay, and it changes the discussion a little bit. Then we want to talk for a minute on stakeholder management, right? It is important to manage stakeholders as project managers. They give us our requirements, our constraints, our assumptions, our quality standards, our risks, our success criteria, approval for changes, etc. So a good way to begin the sponsor management, the sponsor management process is to have a face-to-face meeting with the sponsor. I always encourage this. To be honest, I always ask this question because when I send an email with an attachment and I want a decision, I want to hit them in the sweet spot. So I always ask them, what is the best time to communicate with you when I need a decision? And what is the format you like, right? So during this meeting, several other things can come up and we can agree on, right? The PM's role would be important, role and responsibility, the limits of their authority that they want, that the sponsor should be conferred with, the sponsor's role and responsibility. So largely, the sponsor could have a role in every single process group in project management. So do they want that? How do they like to be communicated? What frequency do they like updates in? What is the risk utility position? Is your sponsor a risk seeker, or are they risk neutral, or are they risk averse? What is their tolerance for risk? What is their risk acceptance level? What is their risk threshold, the maximum risk they would ever take? What is your sponsor's need for reporting, right? Especially of variance reporting, right? One of the questions that I know a fellow project manager asks the sponsor is, when do you want to hear the bad news? Is another question that I often ask. Although it's difficult to ask that question, right? And I wouldn't make it my first one, really, with the sponsor. But it's really important to clarify or clearly establish the parameters surrounding a crisis on a project. I've been around enough senior managers to know that the one thing they like least are surprises, and yet finding out about it from someone else is even worse than that. So we want to build a stakeholder map, right? Often stakeholder management processes rely on simply making a list, writing down their email address and their phone number. No, wrong approach. I mean, it's a good start, but you want to keep going. Stakeholder management can be much broader in intent and scope. It identifies how engagement should work on projects and converts your new knowledge into realistic change management plans. So this process is a way of engaging key people on any project, right? And project teams should be speaking with all the stakeholders, obtaining viewpoints, creating that set of actions as part of the project plan, right? So you want to then map these stakeholders. This is a dynamic process, involves the team, and you want to enable organizations to graphically represent all the stakeholders, the political environment in which they operate, and the relationships between the stakeholders. There are key areas to mapping. Sometimes that's drawing the political structure, right? A recognition of unofficial relationships, maybe. What about working back from those who change the most to those who have authority to make change happen? What about identifying stakeholder pressure points in a project? I always ask, what are your pain points? Such as shortfalls in the commitment or maybe not enough influence or lack of institutional power or poor communication. You could even do work your effort to provide opportunities for multiple views to be evaluated with stakeholders as you map them. You could predict how potential recommendations using this approach will affect stakeholders and give you a chance to modify it before you do. And of course, you'd update this stakeholder map as it develops and evolves, which is almost regularly. And engage a wide set of project managers and stakeholders to work with to ensure that you got it right. Here's kind of what mapping them might look like, right? From low to high on influence, and at the bottom, low to high on their commitment to change in your project. And so by doing this, you can categorize them into groups along this X and Y axis. If they're high influence but aren't committed to change, they fall here, and that would require a different set of communications tools to do that. So, and then you want to develop stakeholders. You want to move them along the path, right? It's vital to have a development plan for the stakeholders. They don't need to know that, but you know that. This forms a key part of the stakeholder management plan. It's like a subsidiary plan of the project plan, and you're defining the processes, procedures, tools, ways to effectively engage stakeholders in project decisions and in execution. So the sponsor is really the most critical leadership in the project after the project manager. They own the budget, and so they've got a great deal of responsibility in this project, right? The sponsor, when it's sponsorship, when it's well done, is in line of sight, right, to change benefits, right? So you want to have clear accountability. You want to have legitimate reasons for people to engage in the change that you might make. You want to have a clear sense of commitment to a new way of working, etc. So sponsorship is most effective when executives and managers throughout the organization work together to coordinate and communicate in a clear, consistent manner, right? Sustaining sponsorship, that's really important. Then we want to make sure that we build trust in our organizations, right? And so open communications and building trust is about these pillars listed here on the right-hand side. And those are things that impact your trust approach, right? So open communication starts with defining trust, right? Not the prediction of someone's behavior just because we've known them for a long time. Those who trust learn to be open, even exposed to weaknesses and failures, right? You're developing that relationship. And it's a vulnerability-based trust, right? This is based on one simple and practical idea, that people who aren't afraid to admit the truth won't engage in the political behavior that wastes everyone's time, right? Open communications means achieving trust, be willing to take risks, be vulnerable, and get comfortable and become unafraid, right? This is a great slide, kind of self-explanatory. We're not going to do the exercise. We would do that in class, so I left it in the slides. But I did want to say this is in the end how team trust creates team maturity. And it helps develop that high-performing team, and you'll recognize those processes. Okay, that's all I have. See you online.